You don't have to get up talk about it anymore.
Gentlemen, we're all set.
Ready? Okay, so we'll go ahead and call the Los Osos Groundwater Basin Management Committee meeting for August 30th, 2018 to order. Could you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? And we'll let Mark lead us on this. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So, Rob, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Director Cody.
Yes.
Present.
Caught him off guard.
Sorry about that. Director Zimmer. Director Gibson.
Here.
And Chairperson Ohilsky.
Present. Okay, so first item on the agenda, is number 4, which is board member comments. If any board member wants to make a brief comment, provide project status updates, or communicate with other directors, staff, or the public regarding non-agenda items.
I have a general comment about the agenda packages, and I know that this time was probably a special case, but I think that I would prefer to have the agenda packages a little bit sooner than the obligatory 4 days before the meeting if we could. And I don't know how, like the other directors, to make comments if they have other comments about that. I guess especially with respect to the meetings we have that have the annual reports. They have a big document, more than 200 pages of technical information.
Harvey, could you pull that microphone closer to you? Thank you.
Yep, sorry.
And Mr. Chair, one thing we could do is, as technical reports come out, even before they're part of an agenda package, we could get those released just as draft technical documents, get them out there on the web so folks have more time to review them, even if the agenda package is not ready yet.
Right. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay, so any technical data that you have that we're going to be reviewing during the meetings, if you could post that whenever it gets available, I think we're all on board with that idea.
Great. I like that.
All right.
Okay, any other comment?
I just had a comment regarding the workshop tonight. I don't know if, Marshall, if you were planning to talk about that at all, but...
It was not.
I was planning to mention it in passing, but now's a good time.
All right. Well, I just, I just didn't really see it in the agenda, so I wanted to bring it up, make sure everybody's aware of it, that it's happening out there. Some of the notification to the public, just a little bit of background on what's happening. I don't have a lot of information on it, and I didn't see it in the agenda, so that's why I wanted to know if we were going to talk about it.
Sure, I think it's worth a public information statement.
Yeah, I think, do you want to talk about that, Rob, now? Or
yeah, I think
later?
it's a good time.
Yeah. So it's a special meeting of Los Osos CSD, which I'm going to be chairing as the vice chair of that committee. It will be in the same location. And then, Rob, you might want to talk a little bit just as an overview.
Yeah, so we had quite a bit of public comment during our CSD meetings. This is about the Program C additional well out there on the east side. And folks felt that the Brown Act format with 3 minutes of dialogue was very challenging to have substantive opportunities for a little back and forth. And so I think we mentioned it in passing at our last presentation of this at the June BMC meeting that we were hoping to do a workshop, and we went ahead and got that scheduled, announced at a CSD meeting, and then sent a postcard to all the surrounding neighbors in a wide area. The CSD did. And it's really, the content will be similar to what we talked about at our June BMC meeting. It's a little bit of additional information, and people will have more than the 3 minutes. We'll have more opportunity for dialogue. And just one item. So we're going to go possibly up until 9 o'clock if we really need to. So
Right.
Just an open forum.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, I thought since it is a Program C well, that we would be talking about it a little bit more in the under this purview, and so really didn't know how the outreach effort, since the well drilling is in a Golden State Water Service area, how the outreach effort took place there to notify us or our customers. And so I thought it would probably be helpful if we're not going to talk about it here, that we just have a little bit more communication on the outreach effort. And we really didn't know about the meeting or anything like that.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I mean, Rob and I talked about this. It's a special meeting. We talked about whether we should have a Basin Management Committee meeting or a joint meeting, or it should just be a CSD meeting. But since the well is under the purview of the CSD, it's a special meeting of the CSD. Obviously, everybody's invited, and we did do a significant outreach to the local area, and as Rob mentioned, we expanded the area rather than just the immediate area. So,
But we understand that need for more communication. I definitely hear that.
Yeah, because that's where I kind of get a little bit confused when we talk about it being a Project C expansion, and then it being a district project. So a little bit of confusion there.
Right, similar to the Golden State expansion well number 1, drilled and done as a Golden State project. We viewed this as a CSD effort, but we can certainly communicate more clearly.
All right, thanks.
okay, thank you. Bruce, do you have any?
Just, I don't, go there it goes. Just quickly, since last we met, the Board of Supervisors has taken a couple of actions, one particular on Los Osos wastewater project to finalize our enforcement approach, graduated a tiered approach. We still have about 73 properties, when last I heard, that were not in the process of connecting or not pending something holding them up to connect, and most of those apparently are simply, as they said in Cool Hand Luke, we have a failure to communicate. So once we've got the structure in place, we've got a little bit more leverage to make those connections. We're still at 97% connected, so that's a good thing. And we're continuing to work on recycled water agreements and look forward to those being concluded and in force and in play soon. So that's all the things that I have to report. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow up on that, the Los Osos CSD, we still have some funding available for people, low-income people that would qualify under that criteria. So that's money that the CSD does have available for those 70-some non-connectors that if they do meet the standards. So, and that's something we've been pursuing as a CSD to try to make sure that if anybody hasn't connected because of the funding issues, that we could help them with that. So I think that's all the CSD, other than we have the workshop tonight that Rob will be presenting. I'll be chairing and Rob will be presenting, but I think for everybody's benefit, again, that's not going to be a formal setting. It will be an informal setting, so we'll be available to do some back and forth conversation rather than having this set 3-minute Brown Act normal procedure. So obviously we'll be required to follow the requirements of the Brown Act that do apply to special meetings, but we're hopeful that it will be a good back and forth and we'll be able to address all the comments. And I think that technical report that Rob's going to talk about tonight will be very, very helpful to let a lot of people help a lot of people understand what's going on here. So I think that will be very, very helpful. And then, so I don't know if you have anything to add, Rob?
No, I'll have a few other comments throughout the day, too.
Okay, so with that, then we'll move on to number 5A and B, which is the consent agenda. So we have the minutes of the meeting of June 20th and the approval of the budget update and invoice register. Does anybody want to poll either of those items?
I have a question on 5B, if we could still take...
Yeah, as long as it's not a substantive question. I mean, as long as it's, you can ask the question, yeah. Right.
One of the budget items... Sorry about that.
That's what happens when you're a rookie up here, right?
Yeah, I'm in training, so I'll catch up. There's a little bit of a budget overrun in this for the adaptive management groundwater modeling. And I assume that that's probably related to this document we have in the agenda today. It's item 7B. But I wondered if...
Director Cody, help me understand which item. Item 4 is adaptive management groundwater modeling, and I'm showing 82% of budget.
Okay, so... Let's see. Yeah, item 4 has $1,740 remaining in the budget.
Right.
Right.
And we're set to just now discuss approving 2 additional expenditures, and that's on the last page of this document is, if we're going to number these rows, it's row number 2 and row number 5.
Right, and those costs incurred do include the invoices that are proposed to be approved today.
Right. And doesn't that constitute a budget overrun in that category?
In other words, actually, let me go to that and make sure I'm tracking with you here.
It's already included into that number in the budget.
Okay, very good. Sorry, I misunderstood.
Yes, they're included in that 8,000.
It's always good to ask questions.
Yep.
And in the future, I can ask these questions. If we get the documents a little earlier, I can ask these questions on the phone with you.
Yeah, fine.
Before the meeting.
Good.
Okay, so do we have any public comment on the consent items? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission, or committee, pardon me. If you can put your microphone.
I'm a non-person.
I think Bruce is approving moving approval here.
Okay,
So.
it's not...
The one on top.
we can swap you out there.
Why don't I make the motion? I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda
I'll second that.
And the budget,
and
correct?
the budget, yes.
So you're moving to approve the minutes and the budget?
Right.
Under 5.
5A and 5B.
Okay, correct. Then we have a second?
Yes,
Okay.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, then we'll move on to the executive director's report, Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to briefly cover some of the comments in my written staff note here, we continue to look at availability of grant funding opportunities. I did want you to know that under the IRWM process, the Integrated Regional Water Management process, where there is a fair amount of matching funds available, the district's having some traction on at least one Program A project to finish out their 8th Street well. And we did have a chance to look at the current funding programs relative to the potential for future grant applications for nitrate removal, because that had come up at a previous meeting. And so based on our review, it does appear that if you did decide to pursue a Program B project and include nitrate removal, we'd expect that to rank highly. But it only covers the capital portion of that project on a matching fund basis. So if you decided, well, we do need another nitrate removal facility, I think you'd probably have a high chance of getting at least a 50% match for the capital. I did want to remind folks that in the basin plan, we have a projection of the operational cost of nitrate removal, which is substantially overshadows the capital. So when you look at brine removal and all the cost to operate, you're really probably at 80% of the life cycle cost of the project just on the O&M. So while you'd be very competitive in a grant application, you have to consider the back end of it as well. But I wanted to report back out on that. We continue to...
Rob, before you move on, you're going to move on to the zone of benefit?
Yeah, I was going to.
I want to see if anybody had any questions on
Yeah,
that
sure.
one item.
Good. Yeah.
I did, Robin. So you're estimating $800 to $1,000 an acre foot of just O&M, or is that factoring in some amortization of capital cost?
That's just O&M, and it depends on the nitrate levels and the actual well, because that drives the amount of
Right.
brine you.
So that seems to be in line with other water costs, basically, isn't it?
It is. It is, particularly for folks who have surface water in other basins. I think
State waters, for instance.
about there.
Right.
And so it's not an unreasonable cost.
Okay.
It is still, compared to the cost of just drilling a deeper well that doesn't require treatment, it's an order of magnitude more on O&M by the time probably 5 times more on
Right.
O&M.
And then I noticed in your discussion there that they see this denitrification as aquifer management, not cleanup. But is there any way have you tried to couch it as a cleanup project?
We had a hard time getting them there on seawater intrusion mitigation
Okay.
through new wells. I think nitrate removal will be seen as multi-benefit,
Right.
highly ranking. I mean, the district was fully funded for our South Bay well on Prop 84, and the programs continue to encourage that type of project. So I think if you decided to go that direction, I think you'd probably be successful on the capital.
It would be a better environment for getting those capital costs, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think you'd have a very good shot.
Okay. And the IRWM process, the timeline on that would be
multiple rounds. I mean, there's an existing round going and ranking process that we wouldn't apply to, but there's a future implementation round that will come, I think, next year. Okay. And there's Prop 1 rounds that are continuously coming through, and all of them have elements of aquifer cleanup, chemical removal, that sort of thing. So, again, I think you'd have a good shot at it.
And I think that goes to your trend analysis, that you're going to see that nitrates are in a special case of
right.
Something we
Not
need
going
to,
down.
we need to work on. And have you looked at anything in the Prop 3 water bond coming forth this November? Is there
a
some
little bit.
opportunity there?
Yeah, a little bit. We'd see how the regulatory framework on the back end determines the categories they put those dollars in. Remember, the resiliency and some of the concepts they're talking about seem to be well applied to a basin like ours. So I think that we definitely keep an eye on that.
So we're pretty well safe. I mean, you and I have talked considerable about, denitrifying upper aquifer water is a very direct offset to production in the lower aquifer, a 1-to-1, which depending on the cost benefit seems like an attractive approach. So we're staged and ready. I think we've done a bit of analysis of the cost and the benefit.
Yeah,
we're
doing it.
You're in the midst of it right now.
Yeah.
So I think it's something we need to keep on the front burner here.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anything? Yeah.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, we recently started our ion exchange for nitrate removal at Rosina, and the brine disposal is the number one concern, and there's the cost aspect of it, but then there's the viability of long-term disposal. It's getting more difficult to dispose of that. We're going through some challenges right now with our disposal permit, so we need to look at the immediate cost today, but also what is the viability of that technology. So there is other technology out there for nitrate removal, but just the brine disposal is one of our biggest challenges right now.
Yeah, and that was the item I wasn't going to raise, was the brine disposal aspect of it, which, as you mentioned, it may work today, but tomorrow it may not.
Right.
And if I might...
just one other thing, just to piggyback on the other opportunities, Prop 68 that was approved, is that something that we might open up other opportunities for us?
Yeah, I haven't done an independent look at that, but I think that could be. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Because I think, looking at if there's funding opportunities for our creek discharge really is something that
yeah.
I mean, we all agree that project is important, and but the cost of it is high.
We put that on the agenda today with some ideas to combine it with some of our stormwater programs that are very grant-worthy. So.
Right. Okay, great.
Just a thought to keep also a regional view of this, because there are other sites within the county who are going to be having brine disposal. Cambria CSD is one of them, who's going to be doing brackish water desal at some point. And strength in numbers, perhaps, or maybe bigger problems.
Yeah, and boy, to get me started on Bryan, we'll be here all day, but we do need regional thinking on brine disposal and regional leadership, and it's been a real challenge for quite some time. So with one place to take it, essentially, and compared to being in the East Bay where they only charge 3 cents a gallon and it's 11 cents here, there's quite a spread. So we'd love to see some focus on that over time. We've communicated that to the regional board as well. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll let you move on then, Rob.
Great. Not a lot to update on the zone of benefit analysis. You know, the district has adjusted its rates to fund at least the Program C well that it's pursuing. And Golden State has already finished its Program C well. There is a somewhat detailed update that county staff provided on the Sigma process and the next steps for the basin boundary modification. And there might be some county staff here who could answer questions about that if you wanted to talk about that specifically. But there's some key dates coming up that you see on your agenda here, including a release of approved DWR boundary modifications anticipated for this winter. So we should be hearing something about that perhaps by the end of 2018. And Director Gibson gave an update on the Los Osos wastewater project, but I wanted to add to that flows are still peaking at around 0.5 MGD. So really they haven't migrated, and effluent is being disposed of primarily at Broderson, where they've totaled about 304 acre-feet. Total 290 to Broderson, and the remainder to Bay Ridge. So Bay Ridge is about 14 acre-feet, or 5% of the total amount of effluent disposed of. And then I believe coming back in front of the Board of Supervisors, hopefully in October, we'll see some agreements coming forward for recycled water. I know the district's already taken action on their agreement. And then did want to let you know that I am reaching out and have reached out again to Morro Bay to communicate this committee's willingness for dialogue as they've pursued their one water supply analysis. Of course, they have a wastewater project that's ongoing that's requiring quite a bit of focus. But we've reached out again, communicated our willingness to talk and compare opportunities, since we both border Estero Bay. So that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, and then I'm sorry.
I just have one. The Los Osos wastewater agreements thing, so the district has approved through their board process, and then Golden State's also approved it through their company too, and so we are close, and we hope that, I think we all agree that, coming in October, if we can get those agreements. We've made a substantial effort to get those agreements in place for all the agencies involved. It's been a lot of work for everybody, and hopefully we can make that happen this October.
Great.
Okay, then we'll go to public comment on the executive director's reports. Do you have any comments on the report that Rob just gave? If you could please state your name and 3 minutes, please.
Chuck Cicigna. We knew going into construction that it would take 30 years before our $150 million treatment plant would possibly reduce nitrate levels to low standards. So we knew it was going to take a long time to move that bar. But did we expect some reduction, something to show by now? Is it too soon to even think about that? Is it because we're not putting as much into the leach fields that was supposed to be the diluting factor? Any thoughts about why the nitrate levels aren't dropping and how soon that might happen? Because it's tough to think about paying for denitrification after paying for a $150 million treatment plant that was going to take care of the basin. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yep.
Good afternoon, Lindy Owen from Los Osos. I wanted to ask if we could get a some kind of a sense of how much, again, the upper aquifer is an asset, a one-to-one protection of the lower resources. I still have no clue how much nitrate removal is producing a flow by blending into both systems that are using that. And I guess I have a curiosity, is this going anywhere, or are we getting a little bit for the cost of the brine disposal and the expenses of it? How much is it? How much are you taking off of the lower aquifer pumping by having the several nitrate treatment and blending projects already underway?
Thank you. Any other public comment on Rob's report? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the closed public comment and bring it back to the committee. Any additional comments?
I can respond briefly if you like to public comment.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So no other comments from the committee. So yeah, if you could respond, Rob.
With respect to nitrate removal, certainly I think we all are expecting to see that trend to begin its downward progression. And it's in the minds of our groundwater experts, it is too early to make any conclusions on just a mass balance perspective. If you're going in at 2 milligrams per liter, 2 or 3, which is what we're doing right now, those numbers, are going to come down, and they are expected to be very slow because of the amount of volume in that aquifer. And of course, we expect it to be in those wells that are on our south side nearer the discharge should be the ones to kind of clean up first. So we are going to watch that, and as we see any evidence of changes in concentration, of course, we'll bring those forward at least twice a year. And with respect to nitrate removal and its benefits to the lower aquifer, I'd say in round numbers, we have maybe 200 acre-feet, maybe a little bit north of that, that's being denitrified right now and offsetting our pumping in the lower aquifer, which based on the studies that were done, that's between a 50 and a 60% benefit to seawater intrusion. So it's the highest benefit that you can achieve by eliminating lower aquifer production and exchanging it for a different type of production. So it has been effective. That's all for me, sir.
Okay. Ball's in your court again, Rob. We're moving on.
Okay, the next item on your agenda is the Cleith-Harris report on it's a mouthful, the Los Osos Basin Plan Metric Trends Review and Infrastructure Program C Evaluation. And this is a draft report. And can I emphasize, for the sake of our groundwater hydrologists, that it is draft. This is a working committee, and we expect this particular document to get some vetting perhaps over several meetings. So don't feel like you're going to have to approve it today. We're not necessarily asking you to do that. We wanted to get the document out, get some initial impressions, get it out into the public's hands. And a couple of things that in the later versions we want to maybe make a little more clear is the naming and the nomenclature of the expansion wells. That got a little bit cumbersome in my mind. And just to make sure it's clear how this relates back to the expansion wells referenced in the basin plan. Perhaps you followed it without issue, but that's one thing that we want to strengthen in the final version. There's some interesting conclusions in the document, and just to remind the committee, we commissioned this with the knowledge that our groundwater production here in the urban area has dropped off substantially from what was contemplated in the basin plan. Even with conservation in the basin plan, we're quite a bit less than that. And the questions come up that, hey, if we're seeing some positive trends in our metrics and we continue to have a basin yield metric that's fairly good, what level of feedback loop should we be doing on these next Program C wells? So that was the genesis of this study, to see if we should make any course corrections at this point in the life of the basin plan. So Some of the key conclusions are number one, it does appear that with Program C well and all the infrastructure that we currently have in place, assuming that the district finishes its 8th Street well, which we will, that there is not at least on paper, a driving force to have to complete that second expansion well and still meet all the theoretical metrics in the basin plan. What the report does emphasize, though, is that theoretical metric is based on 17 inches of rainfall on average. And, of course, there's going to be drought cycles. But really, they're looking at historical climate patterns as being an important foundation of our basin model. So, ultimately, the report recommends that we do construct at least one additional lower aquifer well as part of Program C, and that well be used to increase reliability in the basin, to make certain that we're hitting our metrics, and to make certain that we're going to be addressing seawater intrusion and not toe the line too closely. One of the interesting items in the report is an analysis of the different well sites and how much potential yield could be realized from those various sites. And again, we'll call this a draft document, but there is, when we talk about a Program C well, not all of the wells would be projected to have the same yield. It's not a huge difference between them, 100 acre feet plus or minus. Mm-hmm. So we think it was an interesting look back, an important look back into our metrics. I think we will suggest doing this from time to time as conditions change, rerunning the model, checking in with where we sit today. But what we'd like the committee to do is to make sure you've had a chance to look at this. Conceptual comments today, of course, are welcome. Written comments are welcome, and then we'll bring this back to a subsequent meeting for more concrete action. So be happy to hear some committee discussion on it.
So does anybody have questions before I go to public comment, or you want to wait till after?
You're asking the board. I have a comment.
Well, comments, you can...
Okay, very good. I have a question on page 6 of the report, and I really like the report. Thanks. I'd like to thank Spencer for producing this great report. He mentions on page 6 or PDF page 36 that the chloride metric data might be influenced by freshwater dilution flow from upper to lower aquifers in one or more of the well bores. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if it's possible to get a clarification for that. And
sure. So one of the phenomenon that at least Golden State and the CSD have seen in the basin is that some of our lower aquifer wells, when they sit dormant for extended periods of time, develop some nitrates. So that to us is evidence that there is some slow leakage through the borehole down to the lower aquifer from the upper. And in this case, Spencer had looked at this closely as part of the annual report and felt that the impact of that was small based on the other chemical items between the aquifers. But it's something that we're continuing to give mention. Just as you look at lower aquifer data, we're always looking for a signature of the upper aquifer to make sure we're not seeing some leakage there in our measuring point.
So in this particular comment, though, he's talking about chloride migration. And I'm curious about that because ordinarily you think of chloride being a higher density fluid, and having it migrate up into the upper aquifer would be a surprise to me.
Right, yeah, we're not currently anticipating that. It generally results in a lowering of the chloride in the lower aquifer.
Okay. Okay, I see. So your comment is well made then, that the evidence is from nitrate migration, and that would be a dilution of chloride in the lower aquifer.
Right, because the pressures in the upper aquifer are higher than the lower aquifer. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a little slow on the
that's a very astute observation. Thank you.
Way more detail than I could ever go into, so thank you for that. Anything else before we go to public comment?
Yeah, just one quick one. Thanks for doing the report. Very, very helpful. I think it was needed. Like you said, I think we need to come back to it time to time. I think our chart that we look at for these projects, we may need to spend a little time and just clarify them on some of the things that we were talking about even earlier, how we define, we were talking about program C wells. We just mentioned that the second one's not needed, but it would actually be the third one.
That's what we've decided to clarify.
Yeah.
That we should go sequential on
Right.
those. Well, 1 was drilled.
Two's under consideration.
2's under consideration, and 3 is not needed at this point.
Yeah.
As opposed to looking back at the basin plan based on site and trying to hopscotch, it got a little confusing.
Right. And then just jumping up to the program A, we've talked about the blending project for Skyline. That project should be identified as completed at this point.
Are you into an appendix in the Cleath report? Or are you?
For 7A.
Well, I think we skipped over 7A, didn't we? Are you into 7B now?
Yeah. You know what? Staff apologizes. I took it out of order.
Okay.
I greatly apologize.
Just testing us.
I went right on to 7B and didn't act on 7A.
So, yeah, we're on 7B.
They're kind of tied closely together.
Yes, and staff got them.
So do you want to come back to 7A?
Yes, please, if we could.
So I'll hold off on that for right now, or do you want me to finish with it?
No, let's
we'll
hold
just
off
do
a little
7B now, and then
Okay.
we'll go back to 7A. I guess I shouldn't have just handed it over to you. I should have clarified.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, so anything else on 7B?
Yeah, if I might, let me add my thanks to the work done. I thought that was a really helpful report. There was one little bit of confusion. I'm looking at page 7 of the memo that's talking about the ranking from highest level of mitigation for seawater intrusion to lowest, urban reuse or agricultural exchange. And it ranks it then the Broderson leach field, ag reuse with in-lieu recharge. And then the text below goes on to say, ag exchange involves offsetting agricultural pumping with recycled water combined with an equal amount of pumping from program D wells, so east side wells, which would make up the difference. And I was trying to think, how is that helpful in the mitigation? And that's because the program D water goes through the treatment plant and is recycled back, augments the recycled water supply. Is that how it?
Not. It's close.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time since we talked about Program D because we haven't been pursuing it.
Right.
But Program D was the drilling of municipal wells to the east of
Right.
Los Osos Creek.
Right.
And since we're not pursuing that, it's fallen off the radar. But in this statement, ag water would be basically taken, recycled water would be used, and then have new municipal well on the east side to bring that water back to the community.
Right, but would offset potable pumping
Would offset
on the
potable
west
pumping
side.
on the west side.
But also, I mean, it doesn't seem, there's no net change in the production. It's the location of the production.
Correct. And perhaps that can be more clear in the text here.
Okay, and then program C wells, so then ag reuse with in-lieu recharge. And I guess it goes on to talk again at the top of page 8. Ag reuse with in-lieu recharge is just offsetting agricultural pumping with recycled water use. And I'm trying to see where's the concept of in-lieu recharge there?
So it's not a particularly artful term. It's been carried forward ever since the EIR was done for the wastewater project. But it basically means because they're using recycled water to grow the crop, there's less water being pumped out of the east side in lieu is the...
Okay. Okay. So it's simply reducing the production.
Simply reducing the production.
It helps. Okay.
I think if I could add, I think my interpretation of this is that part of the in lieu part is that those wells in that zone benefit from recharge of surface use of that water in that location. So through here, he's scoring these various uses that they'll benefit from surface use in that zone or that area.
I think some incidental deep perk of applied water is what you're referring to, and I think that's true. I know it was also basically the fact that the water just wasn't being used. It was
In lieu of
In
recharge,
lieu.
it was, so you're looking for, provide input to staff for future action. It's to square that comment to clarify that, if you would be so kind. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so we'll go to public comment on item 7B. So if you have any public comment, please step up.
And if the public has written comments they want to provide, you can always provide those to me as well. Yeah.
Lindy Owen, I had a couple questions when you talk about the nitrate readings. I wonder if we're looking at all the different nitrate numbers overall, because there are areas below Cabrillo Estates, the golf course, and any houses from S&T that aren't hooked up to this, or from Monarch that aren't hooked up yet. Mm-hmm. And I don't have the metric to look at, but I was wondering if you can address whether nitrates over by the golf course area, because we have huge horse activity, which is the highest producer of nitrates, if you're seeing a reduction there, or if you're compare whether you're seeing a reduction anywhere, and if that area has a reduction, I would be very pleased to hear. I can't see how it could, but... And then I wanted to, again, ask if we have any farmers or ag that is doing the exchange for recycled water. As far as I know, we had no interest from farmers because the quality is not up to what they need. And I would like to know if you could address whether we have canceled the contracts with dryland farmers, since they add nothing to helping our water basin. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, my name's Eric Brinkman, and I'm responding to the Cleve Harris report. Very detailed, great report. Had a question about, it says expansion well number 2 affects the water levels at the upper and lower aquifers. It responds to pumping in a small way. And I'm curious if we have any data on how those lower and upper aquifers are responding to that expansion well. I live in the neighborhood. I'm a resident of the neighborhood of the proposed Andre site expansion well, and as a owner of a private well, on which I derive my water, I'm quite concerned about the expansion well coming in 200 yards away from my property and potentially leaving me with no water. And another question I had is also in that report, it talks about a sharp decrease in basin yield metrics starting 2009 to 2017, which is a positive trend. As I understand it, the basin yield metric talks about how much water we're pumping versus how much we could be pumping. And it seems like it did an about face in the early 2000s and really started going in a positive way. I'm curious what factors led to that and why that would necessitate another expansion well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good questions.
If anybody has additional comments, it'd be helpful if you stood over here so we can save everybody's time. So.
I'm sorry, it took me a while.
No, that's I was just saying for future, not you.
Hi. My name is Penny Arias, and I live over on Hollister Lane, and I have the same concerns. How's it going to affect our wells? We have private wells. If you drill a public well there, I mean, are we going to lose our water? I mean, are our wells still going to work?
We'll comment on that.
Okay, because, and also, do you have any plans to, what if we do lose our water, are you going to give us county water, or what do we do?
Yeah. Well, and we're going to have a significant discussion about that this evening at our 6 o'clock meeting. So, anybody else have a comment on this item?
Yes, my name is Bob Ward, and I have a question about expansion well number 2 that has been completed. Why, if it was originally planned on Buckskin, why it was moved to where it is now. Was that going to be an upper aquifer well, and now it's a lower aquifer well on Los Olivos? And secondly, staff said something about, maybe it was a mistake, in regards to the well that's proposed perhaps on Andre. You were talking about lower aquifer. It was my understanding this would be an upper aquifer well, and I'd just like a clarification on that.
Thank you. Anybody else? This will be our last public speaker, I guess. I see nobody else.
Lee Knutson, Well-Intel business rep, and I heard some concern from citizens about water level in their wells. We have a technology that tracks water levels in domestic wells, and it's meant to work as a network. So usually there's a sponsoring agency which sponsors a community-based groundwater level monitoring network. You guys get the aggregated data. You can create reports and stuff. Groundwater stakeholders can track their water levels in their well and pumping activity. I'd like to get on the agenda sometime. I'll follow up with the director to see if you guys are interested in that. Thanks.
All right. Anybody else?
Hi, my name is John Jasminsek. I'm a geology and geophysics faculty over at Cal Poly. I'm here to offer a freebie, actually, to you guys. We recently got some geophysical equipment. It's called electrical resistivity monitoring. It's something I've discussed with Rob in the past before we had it, actually. And what it allows you to do is make two-dimensional cross-sections of the subsurface where you can fingerprint fresh water versus saline water and things like that. And so it would be helpful for improving the knowledge of the geometry of the seawater intrusion and also the general aquifer structure, so areas where you might have beneficial recharge or recharge flows and things like that. And so what I'm proposing is what we could do is if we could just work out areas of land access, then myself and students could run these data collection activities periodically, either multiple times a year or whatever is available. And this is something we could do long term, so basically throughout my whole remaining career at Cal Poly, which is another 15 years. And we could make some diagnoses of these long-term trends in improving, the quality of the aquifer water, which has come up in some of the previous comments. How are we going to diagnose it? So I have some handouts I could give to you guys with my contact information to tell you what's going on. And it's something that we would like to do. Again, it would be free to Los Osos, and it would be a source of student projects for Cal Poly. And then we would write reports and give the data to you guys and consult in any way needed on that. So I'm going to pass these out to you guys.
Great. Thanks, John.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, seeing none, then we'll close public comment on 7B. Rob, do you want to go ahead? I mean, obviously we're not adopting this today, but do you want to go ahead and respond to some of the comments that you heard?
Yeah, and feel free to approach me afterwards if I didn't specifically answer your question to your satisfaction. But there was a question about nitrate concentrations in other areas of the basin, and we do have sampling data on those, but it's been a while since this committee has seen how that spatially varies, so perhaps it's something we could bring back. I've looked at the metric as a whole, but it's been a while since I looked at the Sea Pines area on that. Currently, no water is being provided to any recycled water user, agriculture or otherwise, but I'd leave it to the county if they want to provide more updates there. And then there were some questions about the factors that led to the sort of turnaround in the basin yield metric. And I think really having lived through that, it was primarily people realizing we need to not just focus on the sewer problem, but we need to focus on seawater intrusion, combined with the community dropping their water demands through a focus on conservation and through rates. Resulted in those changes. So we brought on new assets, new upper aquifer assets. All those actions some of which predated the basin plan, have resulted in some positive outcomes. We are not out of the woods yet, but it's a good trend. And of course, a lot of folks are concerned about our Program C wells, particularly at one site, the Andre site, and other sites I've heard comments as well. And so that's why we were, in June, we gave a full presentation of the different well sites. I think that video is available if you want to see it. I'm going to give that again tonight. For those of you who have already seen it, it might be some old hat. We also have a little bit of additional work. The district looked at some well logs and some of the pumping tests we had done on Sage Avenue to try to estimate what the impact might be if you had an upper aquifer well next to a lower aquifer well, so we can share some of that impact. And I think the global comment is, and of course there's a long process ahead before we get to the specifics on this, but if there are impacts to private wells, those impacts have to be mitigated through whatever means. Has been the district's perspective, and there's multiple ways that can happen. So more, I think, open dialogue tonight if you are available. If not, I'd be happy to speak with folks offline. And there was a question on why the well was drilled at Los Olivos. Was that going to be an upper aquifer well? And I think, well siting is very challenging. It's one of the most challenging facilities, even though it's small in footprint. It obviously has a lot of community interest. That was Los Olivos was an existing active water management site, and having a lower aquifer well there did result in the benefits to the basin yield, and does qualify as that first completed Program C well. And so that's why it was placed there, because it was co-located with other facilities. And Director Zimmer can certainly expand on that if he likes. And then there was a question as to whether we were pursuing under Program C an upper aquifer well or a lower aquifer well. I just want to be clear that we're pursuing a lower aquifer well. There's one of the 4 sites where we might also screen it in the upper aquifer at the Sunny Oaks site, but the other sites were viewed as being only lower aquifer sites. Again, more discussion tonight. We'll encourage everybody to come out if you're available, and let us know your thoughts and comments. And interested in the free data.
So I don't know if Rob, you got some good comments today, but I think probably the best thing to do is just for us to submit written comments to Rob and then have him bring that back to us at the next meeting, unless somebody has another idea.
Sure. No.
Okay, so we'll go that route.
Yeah, and it was good to hear that the committee was, I think, open to the idea that we might have some adaptive management to do here under the basin plan. So I think that's good.
Yeah, and just to confirm on the well that was drilled at Golden State, you're right. One of the biggest challenges is the land acquisition, public acceptance, things that actually expansion well number 2 is going through right now. So the fact that it was an active well site, we have a large storage reservoir on that site. We have booster pumps, backup emergency fire pump if the power goes out. So that facility was equipped with much of the infrastructure needed to provide water supply, and it was a relatively quick process for us to go through the environmental process to get that approved. So that's one of the reasons why it was done so quickly. We didn't have to go through much of what the district's going through right now with expansion well number 2.
Okay. All right. So Bruce.
Yeah, if I could, just a couple comments. I think that what we're seeing, this report's fundamental. Adaptive management is at the heart of how we actually are going to implement the basin management plan. And so really this trend analysis should be incorporated into each annual report. We need to be looking back. I think it is already at a point. The key to this is then drawing some conclusions about what we should do differently or not, depending on what we see in those. I wanted to address comments to the folks concerned about the expansion well, Program C well, and the effect on existing wells out there. That will be the topic of discussion this evening. Unfortunately, I can't make it. But I want to I want to expand on something Rob said, which is just a fundamental concept that should give folks in the area where these wells are being contemplated considerable amount of comfort. And that is, as Rob said, the drilling and use of a well in whatever area of the basin cannot can't negatively affect your ability to draw water from your existing private well. The reason for that is why we're doing this in the first place. So the activities of this committee are to implement and guide a basin management plan, which is the product of an adjudication. So we're under the authority of the court, and the key goal there is to balance the water supply and demand of this basin in a way that everybody has the ability to use the water to beneficial use. And so any negative effect on beneficial use of water has to be offset. So just understanding why we are even thinking about an expansion well in a certain area under a certain program comes under the heading of making sure everybody is water secure in this basin. And I think that might be a good framing concept for the evening, is to understand that, and then we'll see where we go to actually make that true. So I just want to make sure we get that out. And electrical resistivity, great. As a one-time geophysicist myself, it's a wonderful tool. I think it could really be helpful hooking into our new monitoring well that might occur at some point in one part, and those two pieces of ground truth might be a very useful anchor for doing this and getting a wider characterization. So I'm fully supportive of exploring that further. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Rob, we'll go back to 7A.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. So 7A, you have our written update of the basin infrastructure program. We have a table that we provide from time to time to update you on the schedule on those programs. And I'll just walk through that briefly. And I do agree with Director Zimmer that, and I think this has been going on for some time, the clarity of who, we all are pursuing our individual projects, but how do we do that in a collaborative way to keep everybody informed and yet make rapid progress where we can. So that's certainly a challenge of this committee, and we're hopefully getting better at it. But the Los Osos 8th Street well, we had hired another consulting engineer to design that equipping. Those plans are 90% complete, and we'll be looking to get that out to bid. We also have a pretty solid ranking under IRWM, we hope. We look pretty good with that well, we trust, so there might be some funding augmentation there, which would free up dollars for other programs. We'd really appreciate that. The blending project under Skyline, really we should just simply list that as completed. I keep wanting to remind everybody that it's in operation and give the quantity of water because I think it's significant. But I think in the future we can simply just call that one complete and successfully operating. And then as far as the program B, we're not currently pursuing any new program B projects, though under adaptive management that might be something that comes forward in the future. We talked a little bit about funding earlier. And then under program C, the first expansion well has been completed, and it's the second one that's the subject of both our June meeting. We had an item on this, and then an informal workshop tonight. And you're going to be hearing a lot about that over time. And so the schedule on that, I think, has slowed down. We've got a process to walk through with some very important stakeholders. That one's going to take some time. And so we don't have perfect clarity on that schedule right now. Next step will be to think about how to kick off environmental review on that. And so we'll be coming back with updates there. And then a quick update on Cuesta by the Sea. No well, even a monitoring well, is simple here in Los Osos. We did accomplish a wetland delineation, and we're submitting a use application for that well. Even though it's in the right-of-way, The adjoining property owners actually owned the middle of the right-of-way, so we had to get their written permission. So we have 2 owners we're dealing with, and both have been really good to work with. And so we're hopeful we won't hit any owner snags there with that site, but staff's pursuing that as aggressively as we possibly can. We all want to see that well get drilled as soon as possible, and be happy to answer any questions. Mark, I don't know if I covered your comment there sufficiently.
Yeah, and maybe my basic comment is that we would maybe have staff work on these specific items to really clean this up, and so it's a little bit more easy for the public to read and understand, including us, some of the updates that we have. And just basically that Program A was one that I think should be completed at this point, the blending project for Skyline Well. And then just the other comment was really adding, considering to add the creek discharge as one of these projects that we continue to talk about. May be helpful to put that on there. We haven't done that in the past, but I think having the staff work on some of these, and we can provide those in a written format for you would be probably the best way.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, so we'll go to public comment on 7A, which is the update on the status of the Basin Plan infrastructure projects.
It kind of jumped between A and B, so I think my questions hopefully land in the right area.
Go for it.
Buckskin, wait. Oh, talking about beneficial use, I think the discussion this evening will also bring forward the concerns that people have. I think the example we look at is the Paso Basin, where property owners around the fringe of the basin lost their wells, and their only solution was to spend mucho money digging new ones. And because of the California laws about water and your rights as being on top of a basin, I think we still need to go back to some of these. I'm not totally comfortable that you can pull water of the same aquifer as somebody with an existing well by putting an additional well in, that's going to enhance the first well's water supply. So those are just kind of like common sense issues that I think the public will feel better if you can give us some solutions to safety. I don't think getting imported water is going to be the answer if you run people's wells dry. And so Cuesta by the Sea is a monitoring well that is going in, and so that will be simply to see if Broderson is overflowing yet and sending the water down further. I think people don't quite understand how Broderson, again, the distance that we have to pump that water is the most expensive way to get water back into our basin. And if we go back and start looking at the creek discharge, that's the least expensive and possibly more effective. So I definitely urge some progress to do the matrix to see. It's ridiculous to be sending water all the way up there and not really knowing where it's going in the basin. It could be going into saltwater and treated areas.
Okay. Any other comments on 7A? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back. Rob, do you want to respond?
Oh, just briefly, the Cuesta by the Sea well is primarily to look at a gap in our lower aquifer monitoring that's in that location. Has been there for a long time. So we don't know how the shape of the seawater front interfaces with that area. So that would answer that critical question. So not so much for upper aquifer monitoring, although we may do an upper aquifer well there as well, and a nested monitoring well if we have enough money to do it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comment? All right, we'll move on to 7C, Rob.
And you've heard quite a bit of discussion about the creek discharge project here so far, so I felt like it was time to bring that forward. And I'm going to have a few visuals here. Been a lot of words. So this is probably the slide that resulted in not a lot of forward progress on the creek discharge. It was an analysis of the cost of the next steps to confirm feasibility and approach, do the baseline monitoring, and set up the permanent monitoring for a creek discharge project. And even 10 years ago, there were many local examples of discharges to dry creeks where they were just simply a way to manage treated wastewater. They weren't regulated as a water supply project. That regulatory environment has changed, and projects like this that have a water supply benefit are now being tightly regulated by the state as groundwater replenishment and recharge projects, and they have a very extensive set of regulations that apply to these. It was in response to those regulations that we commissioned a study from a consultant to give us this cost matrix as to what it would take to confirm this was feasible and do all the monitoring, baseline monitoring required to move it forward. So, I mean, I'm sure your eyes have gone to the bottom line. It's over $500,000. And what's more is that maybe 5 years ago, there were a lot of grant programs that were encouraging this. More and more communities are using their own resources, Morro Bay, Pismo Beach, and others, to do this upfront work prior to pursuing grants. So you don't have a lot of grant programs targeted at this because communities are doing this without grant incentives. So it's like when you lost the hybrid car incentives, if you're familiar with that. So staff is looking for opportunities to advance this. Of course, we could always take the more aggressive method, saying there's the number, let's figure out how to budget for it and get it done. We think there are opportunities to shave on these costs, things like there's a lot of lab work in here. Perhaps retaining the county lab, which is a little bit more cost effective than some of the private labs, might be one way to do that. That's been suggested. And there are some small steps we could take if so directed. We can bring those back. We do have a small budget item, but it was quite small in relation to this overall cost. But we could do some groundwater studies to try to site some of these proposed monitoring wells and characterize the geology in these areas. Perhaps we could get some free work out of John and Cal Poly. Maybe there's a Cal Poly lab that they'd like to do some testing for us. There's a lot of baseline work in this. So be interested in the committee's thoughts on it going forward. One of the ideas that we had is because we have a challenge with the volume of recycled water. We have less recycled water than we thought we would have. And so the competition for its uses is more significant than what we had projected. We do have a stormwater project that we'd like to bring forward. Perhaps you've thought about it before. We've talked about it in other contexts, but I don't think it's been brought forward at a Basin Management Committee meeting, and wanted to brief you on that. So you may know that in Los Osos there are some areas that simply do not drain. These areas historically flood. And there are sumps right in the middle of our urban core where water ponds up if it's not pumped. Not super common for our community of our size, but it's a reality. And two of the major areas are there at the El Morro corridor, specifically at El Morro and 8th Street. It drains about 127 urban acres, and that area gets a large inflow of water during every storm event. Paso Robles corridor in and about 16th Street is another area. The district inherited 2 pump stations at those areas that take the stormwater and pump it out, and ultimately gets to the bay. It's lost to the basin. And the quantities that we're talking about there depend on rainfall, but it can be 30 to 40 acre feet per year. And that's if you're just capturing the surface water during a rain event. So here are the location of 2 drainage pump stations, and these discharge at a very high volume rate, over 1,000 gallons a minute. Literally fire flow volumes go to either to Los Osos Creek and then on out to the bay, or direct to the bay. And so this is a reality for flood control in these areas. If these pump stations don't function, houses actually flood in big storm events. So those of you who've been around since the early 90s remember the Blue Ribbon Committee that established these pump stations in the mid-90s. And this is a visual on one of the pump stations right in the middle of the urban area, an above-ground diesel-driven pump that fires up in the middle of the night. And, this is quite close to my personal residence. So also you have what we call the gourd shape. In the community, we have this purple area that you can see with the purple outline, a perched aquifer with a very shallow clay, and it results in groundwater levels that can be near surface in some of these areas. One of the reasons why septic systems do not work well in these areas. It really prevents a lot of the more forward-thinking stormwater management concepts, where folks are saying, well, I want to reuse my old leach field and percolate stormwater into it. I want to find ways to take the urban water and get it back into the basin. This perched clay is a barrier to that. When the water hits the clay, it builds up. It results in not enough groundwater separation to make those systems effective. And that water spills out to the bay fringe and just goes to the bay. It doesn't go substantially, a substantial amount doesn't go into even to our upper aquifer. It just goes out. So, that's for tonight. Sorry about that. So the project that we are contemplating is to use the now existing wastewater collection system to collect 2 types of either percolated stormwater or surface stormwater. And one is to use the adjacent basin here, which is at the school. They have a large percolation basin there that's for the most part unutilized in most storm events. And so one concept would be to work cooperatively with the school. The CSD has their pumping facilities right there, to slowly meter the captured stormwater during a storm event back into the sewer system off peak at a very slow rate with controls if there's any downstream issues, and recapture a good portion of that water. The other concept that we've brought forward is that this perching clay, which is driving water levels up and shallow in those areas, preventing modern stormwater management from occurring, that we look to capture some of that perched water and also deliver that slowly into the wastewater system for recycling over time. And that's something that could happen even during the summer period. And we've estimated conceptually at what those facilities would look like. We think they may even function by gravity, given the depth of the sewers in those areas. And we don't think it would be a huge capital investment to do it. So the district has written this up conceptually, turned it in under an integrated regional water management grant, and they're doing a regional stormwater plan. And our project, I think, looks pretty good. We didn't put a ton of thought into it because there wasn't a lot of seed funding for it. But the more we think about it, the more we think, here is a source of water that is currently just being lost to the bay. Are there ways that we can recapture it? And we really like the idea of recapturing some of that perched water because it can happen during the dry season, which could augment recycled water flows and could ultimately go to the creek and be fully recovered back into the deep aquifer of the basin. So the reason we wanted to bring this forward with a creek discharge item is to see if we can't maybe generate a little more synergy by some of the more grant-worthy aspects of water management combined with creek recharge to see if we can't up our grant game, so to speak. But would certainly be interested in getting this on the table, getting initial feedback from the committee and the community, and ask that as you reach out to other stakeholders, be it National Estuary Program or other community groups, we'd be interested in looking at if we can advance this project and put some legs on it over time. So, be happy to answer any questions.
Yep.
I'm very interested in the stormwater project that you're talking about, and I think as you're putting costs together, estimates of costs for that, I think I'd like you to come back to the committee. That's possibly something that we should advance for self-funding here, potentially. I think the gains from that would be very good and possibly low cost, but I don't know exactly what those would be yet. I have another comment about the monitoring wells for the creek discharge projects, which might be one of the first things that gets done there. And I wonder if those might be multiple purpose monitoring wells. Can we talk about sometime, not maybe at this meeting, but how those wells, monitoring wells, might be beneficial for other purposes other than creek discharge monitoring?
That's good thinking.
Anything else before I go to public comment?
Yeah, so the stormwater, interesting project, kind of missed the conveyance of that. We were going to use the wastewater collection system to convey it.
Slowly and carefully.
Good. And then that would ultimately go to the wastewater plant and then come back, or is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
The reason I brought that up is we have a very significant grant in Pacific Grove to do just that.
Right.
Monterey Regional, recapturing their urban stormwater, helping them comply with stormwater requirements, augment recycled water. They got several $1 million of grant funds for that project. So.
And that would be using the piping that's in place for their irrigated recycled water to bring it back.
The sewage collection.
Right, to take it to the plant, but how's it going to come from the plant back to
the purple pipe?
Back in the purple pipe.
Okay.
I mean,
okay.
And presumably it could go into the creek at some point in the future, even during the dry season. And I know at night, because I've spoken to the plant operators, their flows go almost to zero because they have pumping stations before. And so I think while they're going to be nervous about vetting this, frankly, wastewater operators, there may be some benefits to nighttime flows, sort of augmenting those, keeping things moving through the plant. And so certainly this will require county buy-in and involvement because they have to keep that plant in compliance no matter what we send them.
yeah.
And then today, some of the recaptured water today goes to the creek. Is that what's?
Today it goes to the creek downstream of any benefit.
Okay.
Right.
So
It literally gets discharged and then goes right to the bay because it is downstream of that permeable sieve that would accept that water and get it to our aquifers.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And then the last comment I have is just, utilizing the imaging process mentioned. I mean, I'd leave it up to the technical experts to really determine the benefits of that. But if it's a free, it supports our Cal Poly students to do senior projects and could be helpful to us. I think that's a win for the community overall. So I would like to see that brought back if everybody's in agreement with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Okay.
We'll go public comment.
Okay, we'll go to public comment then on the update on the status of the creek discharge and the storm perched water recovery projects.
Lindy, and I just wondered if you could clarify the perched water. How does that compare with upper aquifer water? Is it above the level of most of the upper aquifer levels that we're tapping into? And any idea how much is held there during the end of the summer? I'm just curious how much is there.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Bob Ward, quick question to staff. as far as recapturing some of that stormwater, is it possible or cost-effective to fill up the catch basins next to the post office and behind the grocery store? Even during the heaviest rains, I hardly see any water in those things at all.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll close public comment and bring it back. Rob, you want to respond to those two?
Yeah, and I'm interested in folks, if they have other feedback over time, to feed that to me. But this perched aquifer is well above the level of the upper aquifer. So when we're drilling upper aquifer wells in this area, they'd be well over 100 feet deep, where this water might actually be almost at the surface. I have a neighbor just down the street that has little dewatering pumps for his area that when groundwater levels get high, those pumps go on. So it's literally right at the surface. That's why you may be able to put in some capturing trenches and discharge it with a control valve by gravity into the wastewater collection system. It's just like turning on the tap and watching it run. And as far as quantity, I mean, it's hard to say. It's 20, 30 acre feet more. I mean, you don't know until you do it. And it depends on how much rainfall you had the year before. The question about filling up the other basins, I think it was driving around the community and seeing empty basins after a good rain that was part of the genesis of this idea. And I think anywhere in that gourd shape where the water is not going to go to the right place, I think this could be talked about. So we'll try to put some more specifics on it. And we're looking for funding for it too. And we've, if those of you who participate with the NEP, maybe perhaps they'd be interested, or other community groups, because to do a lot of the technical work to make this look really good for grants, requires some seed funding. So.
Bruce?
I think it's really intriguing. This is, and there's a small irony to the extent that we worried about inflow and infiltration into the wastewater plant. But as long as it's controlled, now we have an ability to take advantage of the headroom we have in the project. And I know you certainly have talked a little bit with our public works staff. At least he's still in the room. He isn't running from the room with this thought.
He will be
so
now.
I think I think it's well worth pursuing. I think it's going to be very interesting. See if we can guide the environmental analysis, which in the end should be all positive. And we'll look forward to sort of sketching out the ideas on how that goes forward. And then you do have two members of the executive committee of the NEP at the table here, so Marshall and I'd be happy to get their involvement as well, which could be very positive. So absolutely. I did have one question on the budget table you had for creek discharge. And what caught my eye there is down on line 7 with the pilot studies, $165,000 worth of pilot studies. I'm not quite sure what that is, and if you wrap that in with $27,000 of treatment evaluation, and we're already treating water to tertiary Title 22 standards, and the $26,000 of the feasibility report, you're pushing $200,000, and that. Where is that? Is there some fat that might be sucked out of that?
I think it's an excellent question. I think we all need to understand that we are producing tertiary recycled water. The state has identified a higher standard than that for this discharge, and it's primarily focused on dissolved carbon in the water, total organic carbon, TOC. And the purpose of these pilot studies, because the industry is still catching up to this concept, would be to vet out the different carbon-based technologies necessary to further clean up the existing high-quality water to meet the higher standards. And the reason it's in the pilot mode is that in many of the coastal communities that have an ocean outfall, like Morro Bay and Pismo, they don't have to worry about too many pilot studies because they have a place to put brine, so they can just hit it with reverse osmosis, kind of the blunt force method. We don't have a place to put brine here in Los Osos other than trucking it, which kills it, right? But we can do carbon-based technologies which should be able to sufficiently remove that organic carbon down to the levels. But it's important enough to establish real results on actual effluent that we're recommending pilot studies. That would be done by some third party that's not here
Okay.
yet.
And so I guess, and Mark Hutchinson can just give me a wave. Do we, no, I'm tracking him very carefully here. Do we have a general sense of the total organic carbon in the effluent stream? Is that something we, so...
I've looked at that data, Director Gibson.
And we don't quite yet.
We don't meet it, and most tertiary plants do not.
No, but we know what it is.
We do, yeah.
Okay, so that's the start. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so, all right, we'll move on to item 7D, which is the Water Conservation Program update. I don't know if there's anything to add to what you wrote, but...
No, I don't know how many of you attended the Water Conservation Symposium. It was great. We had a good time. And just to remind the community, we do have a whole suite of rebates that are available on the county's website, not just toilets either. There's washing machines, hot water recirculators, excellent program. The comment for the committee would be we had a good group. We did have some rebate applications that came forward after that, but it was pretty limited. We sent a postcard to every mailbox, and we really got the word out. So we're still looking for the magic bullet, and I know there's been comments at this podium about Title 19 because you don't have to do anything as a resident. You just, the plumber comes in, they do the retrofit, and they leave. But at this point, I'd say our conservation program is stalled out a bit, and we've done our due diligence and workshops, but we need to continue to message out there that these programs are available. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Any public comment on 7D? Okay, seeing none, then we'll go to the last item on the agenda, which is public comment for items not on the agenda. If you have any comments for things that aren't on our agenda but are within our purview, now's your opportunity.
Lindy Owen, on that last subject, I know that you were offering now the front loader washing machine rebates and through the conservation program, but that pretty much is conflicting with new development water credits because that's what they're trying to sell. So I'm just curious if we're ever going to get these two together, because if people want to develop, they need to hustle those washing machine rebates. So I'm not sure how that's working out. And if they offer a better deal than the county's offering or that we're offering, I mean, this is not even the county one since that money was used for something else. My other ongoing concern is new wells going in, and I think that we should be monitoring quantity out of all wells on the basin. It's common sense that if you don't know how much water is coming out of 500 wells, you don't know what's going on with your basin. I know that there's a new well that was put in, and maybe Mark can clarify that Golden State's water line goes down to about the middle between, was it Palomino, and it's across from the mobile home parks. But that big yellow house, I should know the number because it's huge. And then, anyway, there was a new well that had to be put in next to June Viviani's property, which is next to the end of the Golden State hookup line, from what I understand. I was told that the owner of the big yellow house could not put a well in. He had to hook up because community water was available. The next house is on a well, and the next property just got a well. The one that's on the well is very concerned because it's right next to her property line, and she doesn't know if she's going to lose her water with her 250-foot well. These are concerns. I think every straw that goes into the basin is the one that we need to be monitoring, and all the ones that are already in, we just need to know how much they're using. So I'm going to continue urging that. I think it's up to the county. They can put that in as a requirement and a necessity for adjudication of a basin, and it's only logical that that would be one of the main steps that we would still want to see so that we can see where our water's going. If a private well begins to take much more water than they were taking out, and say if 100 of them start taking much more water than they were taking out, you don't know what that, you won't know where the problem is. So I just urge that we keep working on trying to get wells at least monitored for usage, and I would support a program that doesn't cost the property owner any money. Somehow we just need to put that into the cost of keeping our basin balanced. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, then we'll close public comment and we'll adjourn. And I'll see you back here at 6.